Welcome to this explainer. Right out of the gate, we're looking at a powerful text from the Bible, specifically Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 36, drawn from a daily bread devotional titled, Don't Doubt, Just Trust. Now, if you're a college student, you know life can honestly feel like a massive, overwhelming storm sometimes, right? Between those intense academic pressures, sudden waves of anxiety about the future, or just feeling completely isolated on a massive campus. Well, the water gets deep fast. So if you've ever felt like your fears are totally drowning out your faith, this passage offers an absolutely profound, grounding perspective on how to navigate those storms. And the whole foundation of our text today is actually summed up perfectly right here in Matthew 14, verse 31. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" This single incredible moment captures the main argument we're highlighting today, human failure being met instantly by Christ's sustaining grace. It's so powerful. We're going to dive into exactly how Peter ended up in this position, needing to be rescued, and what it teaches us about trusting deeply in God's providence. So here is a quick look at the explainer agenda to outline the big picture before we dive into the details. First, we'll look at the historical context of heading into the storm. Then, Lesson 1 on overcoming fear, Lesson 2 on shifting your focus, the practical steps to actually live it out, and finally, a wrap-up reflection and prayer. Okay, let's jump right into Section 1. Context. Into the storm. Setting the scene. To really grasp the historical context here, just look at the stark contrast in this sequence of events. During the day, the disciples witness an absolute miracle, right? Jesus miraculously feeds a massive crowd out of nowhere. But by evening, Jesus intentionally sends his disciples across the lake while he stays behind to pray. Then, deep into the night, a severe storm hits. Think about that whiplash. They went from the literal high of a miracle to the terrifying low of battling a storm in the pitch dark, feeling totally alone. It isn't until later in the night that Jesus comes to them, walking on the water. This timeline is a huge reminder that storms aren't just random accidents. Even when your life shifts rapidly from totally calm to completely chaotic, we are never, ever outside of God's sovereign timeline. Moving on to Section 2, Lesson 1, Overcoming Fear. Jesus is present in the storm. The text points out this mind-blowing paradox. What looks like absolute danger actually becomes the very place where they meet him. The disciples are out there battling strong winds and crashing waves, and suddenly they see a figure walking toward them. Naturally, they completely panic. They literally think Jesus is a ghost. But Jesus immediately speaks to them saying, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." You know, for a college student today, a failing grade, a sudden financial crisis, or immense social pressure can feel exactly like a devastating storm that completely blinds you to what is true. And in those moments, yeah, your fear is going to feel way louder than your faith. But the key finding here is that Jesus is not absent. He walks right into the middle of that overwhelming situation. Even when your own focus shifts and your faith feels incredibly weak, his sustaining grace is right there, close enough to catch you. Which brings us to Section 3. Lesson 2, Shifting Your Focus, the battle between fear and faith. Now, the source presents two incredibly contrasting theories of focus that pretty much dictate how we weather our own storms. On one side, we have focusing on the wind. Peter actually steps out of the boat, which is huge, but the second he focuses on the wind, the problem, his fear grows and he immediately starts to sink. On the flip side, we have focusing on Jesus. As long as Peter keeps his eyes glued to Christ, his faith grows. And you have to notice the grace here. Even when Peter does look away and starts falling, Jesus doesn't just let him drown. He immediately reaches out and saves him. It tells us that faith isn't about perfectly maintaining your balance or white-knuckling it with your own willpower. It is entirely about where your focus is directed and just trusting in the one who is sovereign enough to hold you. All right, Section 4, Steps to Live It Out. Let's look at the actionable details from the text. The text outlines a super clear, step-by-step process for facing your own modern storms, whether that's finals week or deep post-grad uncertainty. Step 1. Remember Jesus is present in hard seasons. He hasn't abandoned you to campus pressures or late-night anxieties. Step 2. Actively turn your focus back to him when anxiety rises. It has to be a conscious shift away from the problem. Step 3. Call out and talk to him honestly when you feel overwhelmed, instead of trying to fix everything on your own strength. And Step 4. Trust that he will catch you. Even when your faith wavers, his grip on you is entirely secure. And finally, Section 5. Final Reflection and Prayer, a conclusion of the analysis. The text wraps up with a really clear conclusion structured as a prayer. It directs us to thank God the Father for his sovereign presence, even in the absolute worst storms. It encourages us to actively ask him for the grace to keep our eyes on Jesus instead of all our surrounding circumstances. And it reminds us to express deep gratitude that his hand is always ready to reach out and catch us when our human strength fails. The core takeaway explicitly stated in this research is so simple, yet so profound. Fix your eyes on Jesus. To finish up, I want to leave you with these two reflections directly from the source material. First, where in your life right now, maybe your academics, your relationships, or your anxiety about the future, are you currently focused more on the wind than on Jesus? And second, how have you seen him reach out and catch you in past moments of doubt? Remembering his past faithfulness and grace is really the key to shifting your focus today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. As you head back to campus and face the wind, remember, don't doubt, just trust.